Hello again, friends. Good morning to you, and welcome to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru right here, wherever it is that you pulled up to. It could be the afternoon. You never know. I am your host, the great Brian Last, and I'm going to be reading your questions sent in a number of ways, and in many cases, a number of times by the same people, to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com or on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. The man who will be answering those questions, he is here. He is anxiously awaiting these questions. He even has some of his own this week, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Oh, fuck. Just fuck.
What's your
After
problem?
last week it was perfect. What did I tell you to do last week? I said, trim that and just use it every week from now on, because you got the intro perfect. And here, you talk about brain salad surgery. That word salad surgery is like you gobbled up a gallon of alphabet soup and then vomited out an intro that was all over the page. It felt not even genuine at the start. When you good morning, it was too over the top. Then you just fucking meandered all over the place like a cow looking for its fucking last shit. And it just...
Do cows look for their shit?
Well, if they can't find it. Don't you look for things you can't find?
I'm not familiar with cow culture.
Well,
apparently,
I'll tell you what, the cow culture is strong, and they've got a fucking lobby group in their interest that well, you've seen it. As a matter of fact, they're the ones that put those Chick-fil-A billboards up with the cows. They're saying eat more chicken.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the cow lobby. It's the Anti-Defamation of Cattle League, the ADCL.
I apologize to the cow people.
Or you apologize. See, it's a Freudian slip. A cow pie. Pile. Either one. Cow pie. That's what we've got for you today, folks. A big steaming heap of wrestling knowledge and a horrible introduction. You know, you disappointed me with that one. And see, last week on the program, you came out with that incredible introduction, and then I engaged in some witty repartee where I mentioned to you some of the landmark wrestling collectibles and the historic memorabilia that I'd found as I've been cleaning out the office closets and cabinets, trying to get more storage space here at the castle. Lance Storm's tryout tape, audition tape, Chris Candido's, the Matt Hardy's, the Dr. Isaac Yankem, some of the bad stuff that I've been sent over a period of time. I've recently found some of my earliest wrestling ephemera from my wrestling career, some of the stuff from Memphis. I found an old Exotic Adrian. As a matter of fact, several Exotic Adrian Street T-shirts, all of them ripped to shreds. Because what I would do is when I had to start wrestling, when I managed Adrian Street and Miss Linda, and Dundee put me in handicap matches, I got T-shirts made that said Exotic Adrian, right, on the back. So I can wrestle in my sweatpants and T-shirt because I'm a manager. I'm not supposed to have tights, and I would have looked horrible in tights. So every time we had one of these matches, Dundee thought that it was going to be a funny fucking thing to do to just rip that shirt right off my back. And I would end up, after every one of those matches, that shirt that I'd paid probably $6 for at the time in 1982, that was a big deal. To get that lettering put on and get it made and everything, he'd rip it. It'd be hanging around my neck in pieces. Looked like Dutch Mantel's fucking poncho. So I decided, all right, I'll fix Dundee. He won't be able to rip this one. Because unbeknownst to Bill, before the match, I put on 4 T-shirts, one right on top of another. So when he reached into the neckband, right, and just tried to rip that off me, he ain't going to rip it anywhere, right? I've outsmarted the superstar. What I didn't realize was, in the process of trying to rip those 4 T-shirts layered one on top of another, he's going to rip my goddamn neck off to do it. He got in that thing with both hands and he's ripping he was cutting my jugular. And then I couldn't breathe. I'm like, fuck. I'm trying to help him fucking tear him. And finally he just gave up and just kicked me in the head and threw me out of the ring. But I found a lot of those. You know, if I was treated in such a way when I first got involved in the wrestling industry, with beaten on and whipped on and generally manhandled and had feet wiped on me, that if I'd have known what I was doing, Brian, If I'd have known what I was doing, I would have retained the services of an attorney to help me recover damages for the way that I was beaten up and kicked around.
This attorney will even help you retain your smile, allegedly.
Yeah, that's true, because we know one. I know folks that listen to the program, the Drive-Thru here, will find this astonishing and be surprised at this, but we know an attorney. He is a member of the cult of Cornette. He's actually the consigliere of the cult of Cornette. Pardon my Italian. A man that can... What? I tried.
It was good.
I tried.
It was good.
Yeah. A man, is that the way you say it? A man that can get even with you. Well, actually get even for you. He'll get even with you if you don't pay his bill. But he can get even for you, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been wronged or damaged, poisoned, maligned, injured, hurt, or been left in bereft of your companionship of your significant other or family member or whatever the case may be. Stephen P. New, the man for you. If you need to sue, call Stephen P. New. Get even with Stephen. That's 888-692-8084, or go to the newlawoffice.com. And you just alluded. You alluded is what you did. You referred to, you aligned yourself with one of the latest cases that he's working on, ladies and gentlemen. You know those TV commercials you see, the invisible braces, that plastic shit that they stick up in your face and it's supposed to fix your teeth? Well, guess who's been putting those on? Non-licensed, non-dental, non-orthodontic people, laymen, in other words, in other terms, untrained, sort of like these outlaw mud show wrestlers. Would you want an outlaw mud show wrestler to give you a root canal? Well, that's what's been going on. People that are not trained, are not licensed, are not in any way have received a diploma from a major dental university, like that Dr. Britt Baker. She's got a dental a diploma. She's got a dental license. These people doing this stuff don't. They've been putting this stuff in people's mouth and causing all kinds of problems. And Stephen P. New is now representing an entire class action suit of, I don't know how many people, scads of people all across the country that have had this happen to. He's also working on the opioid crisis. He is also working on the Monsanto scandal with the industrial strength cancer causing Roundup and the diabetes drug Invokana. I've been seeing those commercials here till just recently. You know why you don't see them anymore, folks? The shit causes genital gangrene. Genital gangrene. If you took, or anybody in your family took, the diabetes drug Invokana, and anything untoward is taking place, 888-692-8084. But anyway, Stephen is, I don't know how he does it. How does he have the time for this, Brian? How can he keep up, not only with being our consigliere and running all these unlicensed, untrademarked Cornette items out of business, but also taking all these cases and getting all these huge judgments for all these people? He's Santa Claus. He comes down your chimney with big bucks more often than the fat man from the North Pole does Stephen P. New.
Boundless energy.
I just said 747 words, and you come back with boundless energy.
He has boundless energy.
Apparently, you don't have any this morning. This fine day, one fine day, you'll look at me, and you'll know that our show was not meant to be.
I'll tell you, you hit me with so much there, it's hard to follow something like that up.
Have you ever taken Invokana?
No.
Is anything falling off your genitals?
No.
All right, you're good there. Let's check that one off. Do you use Roundup?
Oh, my God, no.
All right, let's check that one off. What about veterans combat earplugs that are defective and damaged your hearing?
Well, we may be on to something there.
You should have just said, what?
What?
All right, anyway, folks, get a hold of Stephen. He's going to fix you right up. As I said before on a show a few weeks ago, if he cannot fill your ass up with cash, your ass does not accept cash. Stephen P. New.
Our sponsor.
Not for long, but right now, yes.
Well, Jim, we have questions, of course. I know you have some this week, but let me start with one that was sent in
I've
here.
got a lot of questions for you. Yeah.
Oh boy, I bet. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Chuck Nolan Jr. I recently saw a clip of a Greg Valentine shoot interview, and he lamented what the original WWF Intercontinental belt that he destroyed in Baltimore would be worth today if he kept it. He groaned in horror when told Tito Santana had thrown it away after the match.
Ugh.
Has there been any piece of wrestling memorabilia that Jim either had in his hands or had a reasonable opportunity to acquire that he wished he had today?
Well, that lump of Shawn Michaels' hair from Hartford, that still may exist somewhere, but it's not in my possession. All of the tennis rackets that I threw away between 1984 and when I finally realized several years ago that people would pay big money for them, I would just throw them away whenever they got bent up. I don't know that there's ever been there's obviously been pieces of memorabilia I would like to have had that I didn't get, or I would have spent every single dollar I've ever had, especially in the early days of the Charlotte Fan Fest or some of the John Arezzi's Weekend of Champions. I actually, both years I went to the Weekend of Champions, I had spent my payoff for the 2-day event before the doors opened for the first day. Because and I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. God dang it. Well, there was two of them specifically that in the Northeast. This was 1990, right? So the stuff from the late 50s was only 30 years old. And that's where I got the autographed Graham Brothers first issue of Wrestling Review and some of these great old programs and classic magazines that these guys had. And, it's like comic books these days. A lot of the original collections have turned over of the really cool vintage stuff that people got, firsthand. But anyway, no, everything that I ever saw that I didn't buy, I regret not getting eventually, but I can't think of anything that I had a chance at that I didn't get that today I really go, oh my God, and I'm crying. There's been a few things I didn't realize, and I sold some of my early stuff and like the ring-worn stuff and some of that stuff. I sold that at a ridiculous bargain rate because I didn't fully realize yet, and I was just trying to make room. And so I've tried to rectify that when future things have come to light.
Yeah, there was that whole generation of guys that came in at the end of it that were there since like the 50s. So they still had like original stuff. And I am curious, some of those collectors, what happened to their stuff after they passed?
Well, yeah, I mean, some of those guys were selling some of their stuff at these fan fests that, and even then in the 90s, fan fests were not commonplace. But then, in the early Charlotte Fan Fest in the early 2000s, there was still some good stuff there. And I remember specifically, Mike Bauman. What's his father had some stuff, right? But he had a bunch of Florida stuff that he was selling and photos and the big posters, and they were in good shape and everything. And I wish I'd have just, traded him my car or something for some of the stuff he had one year. But, you still find stuff you never know. And there was the guy that emailed me just a year or two ago. His grandfather had been a wrestling fan and had almost a complete run of Wrestling As You Like It from when it was still a local magazine in Chicago from 1950 to 1952. And I, that's not a huge high dollar thing because it's such a specialized audience, but at the same time, it was so cool to me. I immediately say, yes, I'm interested in that. And, stuff that has interesting pedigrees or came from wrestling offices or whatever. But, some stuff still turns up after all these years. It can be cool.
Even in the late 90s, I used to clean up when Dennis would have a convention before one of his big shows.
Yeah.
And I would go there and I got all the original slamograms that Scott Teal did in the 70s at a New Jersey wrestling convention for like $2 each.
Oh, God, you know what? Contact Scott, because Scott is looking for 4 issues of Slamagram from his run.
Yeah, I've talked to him about it. I don't have those are the issues I don't have either.
Well, there you go. He may be SOL, as they used to say on those.
Well, you have some questions this week, I understand.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't you have a report?
A report?
From a report from an Australian wrestling event.
Oh, yes. Hold on. I did have this.
Interesting that I'm worldwide without even leaving the house. I appeared in the ring in Australia recently, from what we're hearing.
I received this report from a friend of the show, a friend of mine, Dan Leonard. I'm at the World Series Wrestling in Sydney live and just saw your dream match, Joey Ryan versus Joey Janella in a no DQ match. At one point, Ryan stapled a pic of Jim to Janella's face. Then Janella did an impersonation of Jim ranting about Outlaw Mud Show wrestlers. After the match, Janella told the sellout crowd, fuck Jim Cornette. So Jim has certainly hit a raw nerve with these two.
The sellout crowd. That's exactly right, folks. You couldn't have got another motherfucker in that barn with Vaseline. So let me get this straight. These two clown show, outlaw mud show, wannabe play wrestlers, one that I understand from people I've spoken to that have spoken to him, brags about he trained himself, never had a wrestling lesson. That's the goof that got stapled. And the guy that gets his dick thrown up on in public, who was the stapler instead of the staplee, they traveled all the way to Australia, which is about as far as you can go without coming back the other side, to fucking get in the ring in front of I'm sure, rambunctious crowd of drunks in some barn somewhere where they thought enough of me. And, you know, this really does. This kind of warms the cockles of my heart. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say the word cock in conjunction with any story involving Joey Ryan, but it tickles my heart. It just warms me deep down inside that I think enough, that these guys think enough of me, that I mean enough to them, that I am an icon enough to them and a mentor and a guru, and they know they'll never please me because they don't have any talent, but they keep trying, that they actually want to look like me. And right there in the middle of that match that they flew all the way to Australia to, so that some fucking goof running a flea market could pay them a small amount of money in Australian currency to puncture each other with staple guns, that they thought enough of me to make sure that the fans got their money's worth also. They did this for the fans because they knew that the fans might riot, Brian. They might riot. They might set the seats on fire if Jim Cornette didn't make an appearance on that wrestling event. So what they did was to show how much they admire and respect me and look up to me, and also to make sure that that measly little small group of fans that looked like the fucking castaways on Gilligan's Island, that they would get their money's worth, that the one goof, because he knew that he would never look like me, because, you know, I don't have a fucking short, pudgy body that looks like a brown and served roll covered in pubic hair. So he was the stapler. And the other guy, and he don't have much of a body to speak of either, but I don't really myself. So he took the staple so that he could look like Jim Cornette. And not only that way, he would be noticed as a big deal in the wrestling business for the first time ever in his life, but also so that Jim Cornette could make an appearance at that little outlaw mud show and warm the cockles of those few little paltry number of fans' heart. I think that's one of those heartwarming stories.
Apparently he stopped the match and did a Jim Cornette promo while wearing the Jim Cornette face that was stapled to his head.
Well, obviously, you know that you follow through with it. It's like, I'm sure he dresses up as me on Halloween, which breaks from his normal tradition. His parents used to send him out on Halloween just as is. They figured it worked that way anyway. But now he dresses up as me because he wants to be like me. They all want to be like me, which is a star in the wrestling business and independently wealthy. And I don't have to have people puke on me or shoot me with staples out in public if I don't want to, which I don't, so I don't. They all want to be like me and look up to me. And you know, if any of them was worth a shit, it would really flatter me. Thanks, guys.
Can you imagine standing next to like Lou Thez the first time? Like, I don't know if he ever would have seen it. Someone whipped out a staple gun.
I don't think he ever saw that, because you didn't ever hear of Lou Thez being arrested for assault and battery, did you?
Yeah. I can't imagine. I can't imagine getting something stapled to my face. Just crazy.
And then when we talked about that, the wrestlers episode or on death matches not long ago, and the staple gun is probably the most humane thing they do to each other for apparently no purpose or reason otherwise than to convince people that they're fucking stupid. I don't know.
Hey, have you seen this guy Superhuman that everyone keeps sending videos around of? I guess he's been doing it for a while.
Apparently not.
He's a guy, his name is Superhuman, but he spells it with 2 M's. Superhuman, you man, but he does like a video, I don't know if they're every day or every week, and it's maybe 15 seconds. It's him on his back porch, and he sends it out to all the juggalos and juggalettes, and then he does some sort of finishing maneuver onto an inanimate object.
Oh, no. Wait, does he look like a fucking little frizzy-haired goof with buggy whip arms and a pale body, and he jumps off his back porch onto tables that have barbed wire on them or of some object or whatever the fuck? And I just saw one. I didn't know it was a thing.
Oh, my God. I saw him drop an elbow onto a microwave the other day. It's just one video after another. That's all he does. And he sends it out to the juggalos and the juggalettes, and then he just jumps onto thumbtacks or toys or jumps into the bushes.
I wish he'd jump in the bushes and stay there for fucking what? Why? What in the world would make you, if you saw somebody else
Internet
jump
fame.
into barbed wire, would make you want to do it?
Internet fame.
Well, you just said his name on the internet, so.
And apparently his parents are the ones filming, according to an interview.
Oh, for God's sake. No.
Yeah.
And look, I know, and this kid, I mean, we say kid, he's got to be 18 years old, right?
I think he's early 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
But his parents are filming it while he jumps off the back porch into barbed wire and through tables and hurts himself. Is what you're saying.
Yes. Allegedly.
All righty. Here's a different question from Bob. Bob, actually, I met at Louisville SuperCon back in December. He asked, he said, I had a question about a wrestler, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind elaborating on it. His name was Ratamyus, and I remember my cousin saying that he watched him in ICW and possibly in Memphis. Do you mind going into a little bit more detail about the wrestler, the man behind the gimmick, and whatever may have happened to him or why he didn't go on to have a longer career? This is the
great question.
Well, and actually, because this is why that I was trying to illustrate to the folks out there that nobody knew who the fuck anybody was in the AEW Battle Royal, because nobody was explained. The announcers, the gimmicks weren't explained or fleshed out, or where did this guy come from, or what's his viewpoint or outlook, or, it said his background. But Ratamyus was a guy named Bill Howard, who was just a journeyman wrestler in the Central States, mainly Texas, places like that. He wrestled a variety of places in the, gosh, what would you say, late 60s through the 70s. The Ratamyus gimmick, I don't know what the fuck it was, and I saw it. Instead of being a guy named Bill Howard like he was when he normally wrestled, suddenly he popped up in Memphis, and I think it was 1977, 78. Ratamyus, but it was spelled Ratamyus. But in Louisville, his first week, it was spelled Ratamyus, Ratymus. The ring announcer couldn't fucking say it. He read it cold on the sheet, right, and fucked it up some kind of way. And the guy, he had a warlock's robe on, kind of a dark purple, as I recall, warlock's type of robe with a cloak, and the pointy thing. And he had long hair and he had a beard and a mustache, and he looked kind of like you would think that a sorcerer or something facially would look like in the movies or something, or maybe Game of Thrones type of thing or whatever. But I don't recall the whole time he was in Memphis them ever giving him an interview on TV. I don't recall the announcers, if they were ever told. This was back in the days when guys would come up with their own gimmicks. And he used this elsewhere besides Memphis, so I know that it wasn't their idea. And it's something that he didn't like. He obviously was going with it, right? I just don't know what it was. He never had an interview to explain. It wasn't even like Chris Colt and Count Drummer, the Time Machine. One's from the 1800s, one's from 2100 or whatever. It wasn't even like this is preposterous, but at least they're telling us. He had the cloak and the pointy thing, and he had the face, and he took some good bumps, and he was a good worker and did some interesting things. But at least in Memphis, he never got a promo, and the announcers never, and he wasn't here that long. And in ICW, I saw him a time or two, but that was after I think I'd already got in the business and I'd moved away from where I could get a signal on the ICW TV show. And so I don't know whether they ever explained it either, but Ratamyus was vaguely sorcerer-ish, and had a name that a lot of people couldn't fucking pronounce. So that is an example of a failed gimmick, because we never really knew what the fuck it was. Maybe they went into more detail on ICW TV because the talent roster was a little thinner and they had more time.
So he didn't get a single interview on Memphis TV. How long was he in Memphis?
Just a couple months, as I recall, just a couple months on his name on cards. There was a lot of guys. That was, you know what? That was right when Jerry Jarrett had split off from Goulas, and he had brought in all new guys, probably the spring, summer of 77-ish. And there was a bunch of guys who didn't ever work there again, and truthfully didn't get over, on some of the cards at the same time as it was the summer of Lawler and Dundee. So they were fucking selling out the Memphis Coliseum and drawing huge crowds. But the underneath crew it was a lot of trial and error. There was a mass team called the Exterminators that were, I think it was Jim Dalton and Chuck Malone, that were in for like 3 or 4 weeks, and they were just changing people and trying to find what was going on. Brand new company.
Well, speaking of trying to find out what's going on, I'll ask a question here. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Jeff Otto.
Jeff Otto.
We brought up Lords of the Ring the other day I think last week on the Drive-Thru. We brought it up.
Yes, we did.
And of course, Jeff was behind that. On a recent episode of The Experience, Jim talked about going into record stores to buy 45s to create his road mixtapes. This had me wondering. Jim talked about the heat that surrounded him and the Midnight Express when they worked in Memphis, Mid-South, and the Crockett territories. The fans seemed like they could erupt into dangerous violence at any time. My question for Jim is, did that same fan hostility spill over outside of the wrestling matches? What was a typical interaction for Jim when he was shopping or out eating and fans recognized him? Were they respectful and kept their distance, or did they behave obnoxiously? Any out-of-the-ring stories from this period of time when fans encountered Jim in everyday public? And there was a question mark there. I just had to get rid.
Yeah, that was about to say. And especially, what was their reaction when he ended his sentences abruptly?
Any out-of-the-ring stories when fans encountered Jim in everyday public?
Yeah, well, it depended on where it was. In Louisiana, I've told many times the stories. I didn't go anywhere alone. And we lived in Alexandria, Louisiana, and bless all those folks down there today. But in 1984, Alexandria was a shithole, and there weren't that many good restaurants. Or, there was a mall, but what the fuck? We didn't have time to go to it. That was the year that I worked over 100 days in a row without a day off, so we never went to dinner. But in certain places, like when we went to the the Myriad in Oklahoma City, the arena there, and all the wrestlers would get into town early and go to the fancy hotel a couple blocks down the street that had the big buffet. Well, nobody was going to start a fight with us there because it was a goddamn fancy hotel in the middle of the lobby, and it was a higher class clientele. But, if you went to the chicken place in Alexandria that was open after midnight, chances are you were going to get some wrestling fan who was going to want to fucking knock you out. So Dennis Condrey got jumped by a guy in a 7-Eleven, a convenience store. One night, just sucker punched him, mad that we had fucked the rock and roll. And Dennis beat shit out of him. And Wade actually didn't beat shit out of him. He backhanded the guy and knocked him over a display of canned goods, broke his own gold bracelet by backhanding the guy. Knocked him out with the backhand, threw $100 bill on the fucking counter so the cashier wouldn't call the cops, and took off with the beer. But, so it just depended on the territory and it depended on the place you were at. But in a lot of cases, no, you didn't go, at least I didn't go places when I was a heel that I knew if I was alone, I was going to have an issue. And then one of the biggest goddamn deals, when we had switched babyface, and it was the spring of '89 in WCW, and Heyman's the fucking heel now, right? I'm the babyface, but I'm in Savannah, Georgia. I'm getting gas, and I stopped to use the payphone because that's where you had to do such things back then before the cell phones. And I was calling home, and a guy at the convenience store recognized me. And he's on another one of the phones, and I hear him talking loud. Yeah, this fucking good, blah, blah, blah. What the fuck? And so I hang the phone up, and I'm ready to get back in the car. And he hadn't got the memo that I'm a babyface. He hadn't been watching TV like, you motherfucker, why don't you wait a while? My brother's coming down. I mean, that was what it was. My brother's coming down here. He had called his brother. Come down here, that fucking Cornette's down here. I said, well, I ain't waiting on your brother. And I'm in my car, right? He said, well, fuck you. And I said, fuck your brother, right? And I start to fucking pull off. And when I pull up, he runs up and he kicks the fucking door of my car. So I'm like, I've already started pulling off. Hey, you motherfucker. So I fucking put it into fucking reverse, and I'm backing up. I'm going to goddamn go have a fucking talk with this guy for kicking my car door. But as I fucking back up and screech to a stop, he's reaching in his pocket. Well, I'm like, oh, fuck, he's got a knife. Fuck it, it ain't worth that. I start to pull off again. As I fucking start to pull off again, he comes out with a pencil and a piece of paper or something. He's writing my license number down. So I'm like, fuck you. I back up again. This time when he's standing in front of his car, I backed up, and he fucking jumped out of the way, and I backed into his fucking car. Boom. And then I took off, right? And then I got home, and I said, he was writing down my license plate. This was in Georgia, so I called Doug Dillinger, who was not only a cameraman and head of security for Jim Crockett, but also had been a Charlotte police officer. That's how he got the job. And I said, do I have any complaints on me in Georgia from last night or night before last, whatever? And he called me back. He said, no, I don't think he got all your license down, evidently. So fuck him. He got a dented fender. I didn't give a shit about my car. It was beat up anyway. But he shouldn't have said fuck me or kicked my door. I only said fuck your brother in response to the fuck me that I got from him. So, well, fuck you and your brother. Well, there you go.
Have you ever had a car that you cared about enough that you wouldn't ram?
Yeah, I'd like to say the one, Black Beauty, the one I've got now, but there's been a couple of instances where I was like, I just dream about it when I'm stopped in some of these traffic schmozzes. But no, don't fence me in. Don't put baby in a corner. Because when I'm in a place that I can't leave freely, I tend to be on high alert at all times. That's why I'm always a nervous wreck in places like New York where you can't park in a lot at your hotel and have access to your car and all this shit. If I'm not at a place where I can freely exit whenever I want to, then I'm a bit high strung, and sometimes these things can happen.
Well, let's get baby out of the corner. I have another question here, Jim. This kind of relates to the last one, so it's perfect timing. This was sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from John in Greensboro, North Carolina. My cousin told me once about a time he got to go to the Greensboro Coliseum for Jim Crockett Promotions Wrestling when I didn't get to go. And I don't know if he made it up to fuck with me or not, but it sounded too legit to be made up. Can Jim confirm this if he remembers? It was probably around the summer of 1986. My cousin supposedly witnessed this outside when he and our buddies were hanging out to watch the wrestlers leave. Here's what he told me. Big Bubba left the Coliseum parking lot in a van, and a bunch of kids pounded on it when he drove by. He then turned around, parked, and went back inside the Coliseum. Bobby then came out with Dennis, and I'm assuming Jim also. And according to my cousin, Bobby was driving a white Taurus that looked brand new. Bobby then, allegedly, yelled at the kids, "If any of you motherfuckers punch my car, I'll kick your fucking ass." Listening to the podcast and having met Bobby myself, he seems to be the kindest, most soft-spoken guy ever. It has made me question the validity of this story decades later. Jim, any recollection of this? If so, could you please once and for all set my mind at ease? I was supposed to go with my cousin and some guys from school that night, but since I couldn't go, I think maybe now my cousin spiced up the adventure to rub my nose in it. There's no way Bobby called the kids motherfuckers, right?
Well, there is some spice to your story, but the spices have been mislabeled. Because Bubba had a van back then, and my God, when you were driving Bubba's van down the interstate, I don't know when it had last been serviced. I don't know how many miles it had on it at that point. I don't know what was going on with it. But when you were driving down the interstate, that fucking van, it shook and it shimmied and it rattled until you got to about 75 miles an hour. And then suddenly, if you could go 75, it smoothed out and it's like you weren't even touching the road. It was beautiful. But if you got below 75, it was like the thing was falling apart in pieces underneath you. So anyway, Bubba did have a van. Bobby did not drive a white Taurus, brand new. As a matter of fact,
what did you drive?
Well, I had a Taurus, but hold on. I had a Taurus, but I didn't have the Taurus at that time because I was going to say that it was probably me because my Taurus was a very pale blue, almost a silverish type, but you would have mistaken it possibly. But I don't know if I had my Taurus at that point. But here's the fucking thing. I can believe that I would have said, "Hey, you fucking asshole kids, don't punch my car. I'll beat the fuck out of you." But it is also a noted rib in the wrestling business to point out somebody else's car and then say, because Bobby never had a Taurus of any kind. Bobby did have a big white Lincoln, but it wasn't brand new. It was from the 70s, but it's a common occurrence. Hey, you motherfuckers, see that car right over there? Don't you dare touch that car. I'll kick your ass. And that would be the babyface's car. But I'm not saying that that's what was done in this. I don't really know. That was not, none of those things were an unusual enough occurrence, except Bobby yelling at people out in public. That's an unusual occurrence. But I do not know.
Have you heard Bobby use motherfucker?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, Bobby Eaton is the first one that I heard say one of my favorite sayings. Motherfucker I may be, but the mother I fuck belongs to thee. Of course, it took him longer to say it than I just did.
I can't picture Bobby Eaton saying that based on the Bobby Eaton I've seen on TV for all these years.
Well, he opened up when you got him in the back seat of the car. Sort of like many other people we used to run into in the wrestling business in the 80s. They'd really open up once you got them in the back seat of the car.
Well, I have a follow-up question on that. No, I won't do that. But do you have any more questions that were sent to you, Jim?
Well, I just so happen to have one here. Oh, God damn it. Do we have... I don't have a sound effect for it. Could we just put a tone in, just the test pattern tone, and see if that does a number? Scott says, on a podcast, well, this barely qualifies, Would you please talk about why Memphis seemed to be the only promotion that had the, quote, on a pole, unquote, matches? My favorite was the coal miner's glove on a pole match. I also never saw a coal miner's glove match in any other area. Please share the other variations of these with others on your podcast. I was always excited to see whoever got the glove and got to use it in the match. It made for some great suspense. Well, yes, it did. And
everyone did it.
And everybody did it. And of course, now it's become a joke with the, fucking Russo, the Viagra on a pole and, all that stuff. But I won't say all the territories, but many of the territories did these matches. It's just that Memphis is synonymous with a lot of these stipulation matches in a lot of people's minds because Memphis as a territory lasted 10 years longer than the rest of them. So there's more video, more people saw it. It was the last remaining real territory, except for Smoky Mountain, and well, they outlasted us too. So, but in the 60s and 70s, and into the 80s, the first coal miner's glove match I ever saw, and obviously it was in the Tennessee territory, but it was around 73 or 74. They had them in a variety of places all over the South because, once again, I have heard tell that there was, once upon a time, like with every other wrestling angle or stipulation, there is some type of glove that coal miners wear so they don't fucking break all their knuckles and fingers and everything, right?
See, that was the part that always got me. I never understood, like it was never explained to me why a coal miner's glove was special. You just did more to explain it to me than any wrestling show I ever watched growing up.
Well, but see, that's the thing, because they explained it when I was a kid too. The guys doing the promos explained it. One of the first coal miner's glove promos I ever saw was that I'm going to take that glove, that glove that those coal miners wear, so that they don't break their knuckles and bust up their hands with all them pickaxes and hammers. I'm going to take that glove. It's got metal all across the knuckles, and I'm going to put it on my hand, and I'm going to knock you out, whoever. And when I hit you, you're going to go down from one shot, and it's going to bring blood. I guarantee you, I'm going to open your face up with one punch with this thing. If I can get my hands on it, you're fucking done, whoever you are. That's the promo, right? And it generally, a coal miner's glove match was booked because in the previous event, the previous match between these two individuals, one of them somehow either got brass knucks out of their tights or a chain wrapped around their fist or a roll of quarters, or they did something where they knocked the baby face out with an object, with a punch. And the promo would then be, obvious, everybody has to know that there's no way that so-and-so could have knocked me out with one punch. He had to have something in his hand, even if the referee didn't see it. Well, this time, we're both going to have an equal chance to knock each other out with one punch. We're both going to have an equal chance to bust each other's head open like he busted mine open with whatever he hit me with last week, because we're going to take that coal miner's glove with the metal all across the knuckles, and we're going to put it on top of the pole in the corner of the ring. And whoever climbs the pole and can get the glove can use it any way he wants. That's the rule of a coal miner's glove match. You have your match in the ring. But if you can escape your opponent and his ministrations long enough to climb that 10-foot or 15-foot pole or whatever in the corner of the ring and get that glove when you come down, you can use it. It's legal. It's immediately brought into play in the match now. And Mid-South, my God, the coal miner's glove matches with Duggan and oh God, who was it he had the program with Cole? Was it Darso? And then they had him again with DiBiase.
DiBiase in 85.
Well,
yeah.
But I mean, they had more than, but that was and then of course, the match is exciting because you're building the drama to try to get there, and you almost get there and the other guy pulls you down, and you're having your match working around trying to climb the pole and get the glove. But then finally, when the glove is gotten, there's a number of finishes you can do, but one shot, one punch with the glove is it. That's it. Because it not only wouldn't be believable if you punch a guy over and over with a glove loaded with lead, but if you did that, then it killed the goddamn, the promos that you one punch is all it's going to take me when I get that glove. That's why getting the glove is so important. And then just because Sometimes the heel would get the glove first, but he would try to use it, but he'd swing and the babyface would duck and the babyface would grab him and give him an atomic drop, and the heel would fly into the ropes and come back off at the babyface, and he'd swing at the babyface again, but the babyface would duck again. It was like the guy had a loaded hand grenade in his hand, and whenever this landed, it was going to be all she wrote for the fucking babyface. And you could build that way. And then finally, maybe the heel would get backdropped. And the babyface would then snatch the glove himself. Oh, my God. But and they had that match in a variety of places, generally in the South and the Midwest and the Southeast or Southwest, where they liked more violent, realistic, bloody wrestling. You can see this happening in Amarillo before you can see it happening in Madison Square Garden. Because it's just, that's the, the audience you're going for. But yes, it was in a variety of territories. Just many of them died out before people got a chance to see what they were. But it's old as the hills. And then there was variations. The belt on a pole. Why is there a belt on a pole? Well, because in the finish between Brian and Jim last week, Jim, the babyface, was really giving Brian fucking what for and almost had him. But then the fucking referee got knocked down, and that no good fucking heel, goddamn Brian, got the referee's belt out of his pants and fucking whipped the shit out of Jim, and now Jim's wanting to get even. So we're going to take that leather strap. It's 3 or 4 feet long, and we're going to put it on the top of that pole, and whoever climbs the pole and gets the strap can whip the fuck out of the motherfucker they're mad at. And it builds the drama. And it gives you someplace to go for a pop and a payoff and etc. The Battle Royals. When the Battle Royals got stale after the 60s, except in Los Angeles and San Francisco, that's why they came up with in the early 70s, the 2-ring Battle Royal, where, there was a Battle Royal going on in 2 rings side by side. And they'd change the rules. Sometimes the winner of Ring 1 would face the winner of Ring 2 in a singles match to determine who won the whole thing. Sometimes everybody would start in Ring 1, and they'd be thrown over into Ring 2 to be eliminated from 1, and then thrown out to the floor to be eliminated there, and the last guy in 1 and 2 would fight. But in some cases, they jazzed the Battle Royal up by saying, hey, we only got room for a budget for 1 ring. So we're going to put the $10,000 that the Battle Royal winner is going to get, we're going to put that check on a pole in the corner of the ring. And imagine how crazy it is when you got 18 guys fighting each other, but also trying to fight and climb that pole to get the fucking check, because the first guy that gets the check wins. You don't have to eliminate everybody. It's a twist. And, of course, generally the check would not be gotten until there was only 2 or 3 guys left, and then you do your angle. And I remember the biggest problem with those matches was back in those days, literally the pole was, you would get one of those metal poles that was about 6 inches around, metal tubes or whatever the fuck. It was metal, and whatever the fuck it was used for. It was about 15 feet tall, maybe 20, and you would lean it up against the ring post. Because, see, to be farther than a person standing on the top turnbuckle would be able to reach up, the pole off the floor had to be at least 15 feet tall. So usually it's a 20-foot pole. And they would lean it up against the ring post and then take rolls of duct tape and just tape around and around and around. And that was the goddamn safety apparatus. And in the 2-man coal miners matches, it'd be fine. But in the Battle Royal, you got 8 guys hanging on that pole. It'd go sideways and come in there, or they'd knock the check down, whatever the fuck. One time, Joe LeDuc and Handsome Jimmy Valiant were going to have a strap match with the strap on the pole in the Louisville Gardens, and they put the pole up without neglecting to put the strap on it. Well, it's the main event. And that pole is 20 feet fucking off the ground, so if you're standing on the top turnbuckle, it's still 2 feet easily above where you can reach, right? Paul Morton is the referee. He's 5'3" and 60 years old at the time. You can't have one of the boys put the fucking strap up, so they get me in the ring. I'm trying to climb this pole with one hand and put this fucking strap on the top of this loop, right? And all of a sudden I hear this voice, and bear in mind, I'm a photographer. It's 1978. I'm 16 years old. I'm still not really all the way smart. I hear this voice behind me. Get on my shoulders. It's fucking Leduc. I'm in front of 4,000 people in the Louisville Gardens, and Joe Leduc, the Canadian lumberjack who has just recently sliced his own arm open, taking a blood oath on television with a lumberjack axe, is saying, "Stand on my shoulders." Oh, yes, sir. And I got on and he just stood straight up on his tippy toes with me on, and I got it up there. But that's, once again, it's like everything else. When it becomes commonplace, people feel the need. Well, everybody knows. Like Bill Watts gave a memo out to the talent one time in Mid-South. Gentlemen, I know that everyone, in quotation marks, knows who you are and that you're stars, and everyone, in quotation marks, knows the rules of all the matches. But in your promos, if you're in a street fight, come dressed like you're in a street fight with the fucking cowboy boots and the goddamn, big belt buckles and everything. If you're in a taped fist match, do the promos with your fist taped, illustrate it, explain it to people. How do I win this match? Why did I want this type of match with these rules? Sell it to people. Who am I that I can fucking win a taped fist match that I've asked for and I couldn't win this match last week? Whatever the case. That's the way you sell tickets and get interest, and that's the way you get matches over. And then you don't do them all the time. You don't repeat this shit constantly. But even before the modern day, the comedy writers and the Russos and the bullshit of the world came around, the guys got to the point where they thought, well, everybody knows who I am. I don't have to explain shit. Or everybody knows the rules of this. The people know. I used to hear that a million times. People know. But the guys who were really on their game, like the bookers, like the Wattses, would make sure the fans knew every time you advertised that match, what are the rules? Why was it asked for? Why you don't have a guy whose gimmick is he's a ballet dancer ask for a coal miner's glove match. A coal miner's glove match might be if the guy had been a coal miner, was from that part of the country, if he'd been a boxer before, or like I said before, if there was a knockout with a gimmick in the previous match or whatever. It's like Wahoo McDaniel. His specialty was the Indian strap match because you watched on TV. In all the Westerns in the 50s and 60s, you saw the Indians would have the fight with the cowboy hero where they'd be strapped together left wrist to left wrist, and they'd have a knife in the right hand, right? Well, they didn't have the knife in the wrestling match, but it was an Indian strap match. Wahoo McDaniel's specialty wasn't a coal miner's glove match because he wasn't a coal miner. But all these things, and slowly, even back in the territory days, they would forget to start explaining. And so like you a coal miner's glove match. I have no fucking idea. Why is that? And that's why, once again, idiots like Russo who are afraid of things like knowledge and learning and reading would never bother to examine, well, where did this come from? How should it be done right? Why do I have questions? Why does it sound hokey? Can we do it the right way? No, he just makes it even more hokey and do it all the time because it's goofy. People laugh about it. That's not why it drew money originally. All these things that are wrestling, what do they call them? Tropes, the tired old wrestling cliches or routines, tired old cliches or routines of anything. They started as a perfectly reasonable thing to do that drew money and sold tickets and created interest and was legitimately credible. And then the Dusty finish that was the Eddie Graham finish that was a remarkable finish that led to incredible repeat business the first time it was ever seen because it was something that couldn't happen in a million years, except it did. Holy shit. But about the fifth or sixth time that people saw it happen in 5 years instead of a million, it wore off. When things are prostituted, overdone, not explained, made trivialized, then they just gradually, and then the people in the business feed on that and just continue to do shit everybody knows. That's where we lose these things. And you have things that can increase drama, different stipulations, different kind of matches that haven't been seen, that can keep the cards fresh, especially in the days of the weekly territories, or you have shit that people burn through, trivialize, make meaningless, do with underneath talent instead of main event guys, do too much of, and prostitute it to the point where it doesn't mean anything. That's the difference. And it's not just a coal miner's glove match or anything else. It's anything, almost everything that was done in professional wrestling, at least before 1980, was thought of or concocted or inspired by something that legitimately happened or legitimately could happen, or there was a legitimate reason for. But then, and once again, also when they travel from territory to territory, some guy like Onita, he got stuck in a Tupelo concession stand brawl. He had no idea why. He didn't know what those crazy American fucks were doing in Tennessee, but he remembered it when he wanted to create hardcore wrestling. When a guy came into a territory, a world champion, he's just there for a week. He sees this certain stipulation match, and then he goes on to another territory, and he mentions to the booker, yeah, I just saw this crazy fucking match they had out in Portland. Holy shit. You should have seen this thing. There was a first blood match, and they had to fucking, wipe the opponent's head with a handkerchief and soak it completely in the opponent's blood before he could win the match, which was a legitimate match they did one time. And so that booker will put his own twist on it and use it there in his territory. That's the way shit happened. But once again, without national television, without the same group of people seeing every program from a specific promotion every week across the country, you could repeat this. You could do these things. You could do them with different opponents, or you could do the same opponents could travel the country doing this thing in a number of different places. And guys kept their specialty matches sacred. Nobody was going to beat Wahoo McDaniel in an Indian strap match. And also, if Wahoo McDaniel was in a territory, nobody else was going to have one. Nobody was going to make it look bad, or they'd have to fuck with Wahoo. Whoever had the matches, Jerry Lawler had the great pile driver, and a pile driver was illegal in Tennessee because that way it gave the heels another way to get heat. When you pile drived a guy back then, it was the next thing to killing him. It was even illegal in the bylaws of the Tennessee Athletic Commission that a pile driver was illegal. And it was illegal because of the promoters who got them to declare it illegal so that they could work angles off of it. So they would have a pile driver match. When Lawler was a heel and had pile driven the babyface, they'd come back. The only way to win is by using a pile driver on your opponent. Ah, shit, somebody's going to get hurt. But if they'd have done 4 of them and both guys had lived, that match would have never drawn again. And now people, a pile driver match, only way to win's with a pile driver. Who gives a shit? Because everybody's gotten up and kicked out of them and flipped. Now they do double flips off the top rope into pile drivers. But at the time, the promoter specifically in those areas where the pile driver was an illegal hold kept the pile driver from being used except in certain occasions and only by main event guys, so that when they did that match or did an angle with it, it meant something. It's education, and it's explanation, and then it's follow through. And that's what the territories had that today's wrestling can't replicate for whatever reason, because they can't just stop and figure out, okay, we're going to tell people who our wrestlers are, where they come from, why they're mad at each other, and what their strong points are. And then we're going to come up with different rules for matches to put them in either positions of jeopardy or give them a chance to get even at something that's been done to them. That's what wrestling is. It ain't that fucking hard. Or you can just gimmick up a gimmick and a gimmick, and you can throw them in a cage where they're allowed to fucking take all the furniture in the cage they want to, but the cage is electrified, and there's a fucking mice that have been infected with rabies running around on the floor. So if you get outside the cage, you got to fight the mice, or elsewise you'll get rabies. And then nobody wants that explained to them because it's so fucking stupid.
I was at a Halloween Havoc 1992 in Philadelphia, and they had Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal. Jake Roberts versus Sting. And you would spin the wheel, and whatever stipulation came up, that would be the match. And you would see some of the things on the wheel, and it's like, oh my God. Barbed wire match. You never saw that in WCW. That was a big deal. Explosion match, or whatever it was. Like, you know, by that point, if you got the wrestling magazines, you had seen something that Onita was doing. You had seen some kind of explosion in a wrestling match, and the ring is wet. You didn't know what was going on. You had seen something. It was reasonable. Falls Count Anywhere match. You had seen that. What won was Coal Miner's glove match. And it was so awful. So in Philadelphia, this town that likes their bloody wrestling matches, they're teased with all of these stipulations, and they get Coal Miner's glove match. And it was
well, wait a minute. Why would there's Coal Miner's glove match is guaranteed blood? Somebody's got to bleed after they get hit with the fucking Coal Miner's glove.
I don't remember if Jake bled, because he ended up losing because his snake turned on him and bit him in the face.
Oh, God.
Causing Sting to be able to roll him up. And
when your snake turns on you, you know you've made some bad life choices. Well, but here's the thing, and what you said, they had all those names of matches on the dial, right? The wheel. But they didn't on television explain any of them. You had to, you said, well, yeah, as a fan, I've seen the thing where Onita, the ring blows up or something. It was the same thing as all the people on Twitter going, well, if you'd have done research, Cornette, on all these wrestlers before that you watched the show, I'm surprised that only about half of the population jumped in to say, you dumb fucks. Why is the burden of proof on me? Why is the burden on me? Well, I'm going to pay $50 for this brand new wrestling promotions pay-per-view, but I better spend a couple hours boning up on who everybody is and what their background is, because they're not going to tell me on the show. What the fuck? Right? Hey, people write, well, you should do some research. No. When you go to be entertained, you don't need to have Elton John stop and say a 30-minute dissertation on, well, I'll explain to you what this song meant when Bernie and I wrote it. It's incomprehensible, some of these fucking people. No, if you've got a product that you are trying to sell to people, and they, on the surface of it, on the face of it, can look at it and go, what the fuck? I do not understand. You got some splaining to do. And just as we've just illustrated with the stipulations of matches that used to mean something and used to sell tickets because they used to be understood and adhered to, one must adhere to the stipulations. I found out that out the hard way when I thought they'd not want to see Ricky Morton's head shaved in Johnson City, and they'd rather see Candido's. But nobody bothers. They just think, okay, I'm dressed up like a goddamn three-headed Martian, and I'm in a match called a, ultimate surrender match, but I'm not going to tell anybody the rules or why I'm in it or how I got this way.
You're out of touch, Cornette.
I'm out of touch. So there you go. The Coal Miner's glove match, baby.
Well, we have time for one more question. Did you have any more emails?
Well, I do have. This might tickle a bit of conversation out of us. This is a long and somewhat sludgy email, but I'm going to get to the meat of the matter.
How long was it?
Well, it was so long. Daniel starts by saying, I'm someone who was born after Vince McMahon admitted to the world that wrestling was not 100% legitimate. And as such, I never got to experience wrestling when it was treated like a sport. And, then basically, as he goes on to work, presented as legitimate by the promotion. I had a question about the fans who were around at that time. When wrestling was revealed to be a work, how did fans of wrestling react to this? Did they feel betrayed or manipulated that the sport and heroes they loved weren't actually competing? He mentions that I talked about the Rock and Roll Express. The people loved them so much they had a portrait of them on the wall next to Jesus or their family, right? Did fans like this react badly when wrestling was revealed to be a work? There were fans who were willing to get themselves arrested if that meant they could attack the heel wrestlers. Did any of them react badly to finding out they went to jail for attacking wrestlers that was just working them? You think? I've asked this question on the drive-thru, but it never got answered. He blames you. No, he says you constantly assert through questions. People send the same ones multiple times. But anyway, what about when people found out? And of course, it didn't happen all at once, like this sudden realization. Remember, I told the story about when I was at a Ring of Honor event at the Norfolk Scope in 2012. The guy that had been the backdoor guard since the 70s and knew the stories of Flair and Wahoo, and the guy, at the boathouse or whatever it was in Virginia Beach, the nightclub they went to, and all the fights, and he had seen the brawls in the back of the Norfolk Scope, and he'd been one of the main security guys at the back door for a building that Crockett Promotions ran every 2 weeks for fucking years. And he was talking to me about all those stories, how, boy, yeah, when Wahoo and Valentine hit each other, you could hear it. And boy, I remember they said one night Wahoo nearly killed a man down there at the boathouse with he hit him with the chops and everything. He said, of course, I saw this television program. It was about 6 months ago where they revealed that it was all set up. It was one of the documentaries on wrestling he had seen in 2012. After he'd been around wrestling for 40 years, been a door guard, known to spoke to these guys, he found out in 2012 it was a work. And he didn't seem to be happy about it.
That's crazy.
Yes. That's the thing is, yes, all those things that the guy said, yes. Can you imagine having been, some people were legitimately pleased with themselves. They considered it an even trade, that they may have spent the night in jail and they may have spent some money on fucking whatever the bill was for disorderly conduct or whatever the fuck, but they got to punch me in the face. So they in their minds, they were even. Then they found out it was all hogwash all along. He was working us. It's the same principle as we have talked about the unfortunate downfall of wrestling in Dallas when so many things publicly came out about the Von Erich family. They lost faith. Those people, a lot of them knew that wrestling was predetermined, and a lot of them didn't. I was around a lot of them that didn't. They're on the spot at the time. But it was the same principle. It hurt their feelings. The fans who were the most loyal, who put the picture of the Rock and Roll Express up on the wall next to Jesus and their Christmas family picture, who went to jail to take a swing at the heel that was fucking with Ricky Steamboat because goddamn it, he needed help. The money that they had spent and the gifts that they had brought the baby faces or the rocks they'd thrown at the heel's car on the way out, the way that they had been for years and years intertwined in this world of wrestling where they cheered their heroes and they booed their villains, and they made these sacrifices, whether financial or physical in some cases or legal, to go through all this and support this shit. And then gradually over a period of time, starting in the late 80s and continuing through the Attitude Era when nobody could believe anything anymore except Steve Austin. And then we killed that when Steve hugged Vince McMahon and became one of the boys. And then the internet. And those people, it wasn't just like it was something that I used to like to watch that TV show on Sunday nights, True Blood. It was good for a while. They lived this shit and breathed it and took their families to it. And for the wrestling fans that were devoted and the hundreds of thousands of people across the country every week, 6 figures of people went to see live wrestling, left their homes, paid to park, bought tickets, took the family, bought beer and drinks. They were the ones that were most upset when some of them always knew, a lot of them always knew something was going on. Nobody ever knew how much or how or what was manipulated. That was the fun of it, trying to go and see if you could pick it out. But when it was revealed the level of how much everything, and also the fact that now more stuff than ever is controlled. If you think the level of how wrestling was controlled in the 80s was well, it ain't nothing the way it's controlled today, as we know. It disappointed people. It turned them off. They got actively mad. It wasn't like just something they gave two hoots about every once in a while. It was something. So the most devoted fans were the ones that was turned off the most by the way things changed, and the ones that now just cannot stomach what they're being fed as a wrestling product, in large part because it's fucking silly and stupid, and there's no pretense of we're just coming out and saying, yeah, we're just all having fun. Nothing important to see here. We're just jacking off. Yeah, I mean, once again, Jim Ross could tell this story better than I do, but when Danny Hodge, after he turned pro and they immediately put the World Junior Heavyweight Championship on him, he's defending against Angelo Savoldi in Oklahoma. I can't remember whether it was Oak City or Tulsa, but it was near home. And Hodge's fucking father, when Savoldi was healing him near the ropes, Hodge's father ran up and fucking didn't stab him. He cut him, sliced Savoldi with his fucking pocket knife, 70, 80 something stitches. Because they didn't smarten him up. They did after that. But it wasn't, not only did they not smarten the fans up, it wasn't the thing back then, in a lot of cases, to tell your family any more than they absolutely had to know. Which is why you hear the stories about the fucking, wasn't it Kamala's wife? When he won the Battle Royal for $5,000, she was asking him where the fucking check was. I mean, because you erred on the side of safety and telling less than you needed to instead of telling more. And the further back you went, the less that got told in time. So, yeah, a lot of the fans got upset. A lot of the fucking families or associates of the wrestlers got upset. I remember in the 80s guys telling me, yeah, so-and-so, I want you to come out and meet my friend so-and-so, but he's not smart. So, make sure to kayfabe. They had to differentiate because you wanted to make sure if you got a friend of yours that's come to the matches with you, but he's hanging outside there waiting to meet some of the wrestlers, but he ain't smart. So don't fucking kayfabe. Don't say anything. Now they're fucking looking for people on the street to come in and show them how they do shit, even if they don't want to know. What do you mean you came in here for a fucking donut? I want to show you how to get juice. A whole different world. So you didn't live through it, my young letter writing friend, but yes, it wasn't just all at once a switch flipped overnight around the globe. It took a while. Now there's very few people like that security guard in Norfolk. But yes, it had all the reaction that you would expect it would. The boys were upset. The fans were upset. And that's why there used to be so many more of them. It's, in my opinion, still to this day. You can tell people, people can either believe something and follow it, or they can know that there's something to it, but at least you're making a good effort to conceal it, and they'll fucking buy it and see it because they don't want to see what they're seeing, so they want to see what they want to see. But you can't just come out and tell people this is all bullshit, all scripted, all in fun, all contrived to make you excited or whatever, get a reaction out of you, but we don't really mean any of it. And then just have the fans that are fans of wrestling as the art form and have as many people as if they think they're watching a fucking fight. You're just not gonna. It's never gonna fucking happen. And it hasn't happened. Ain't gonna happen again. You know me, Brian, always the optimist, but do you know why that I am the only personality in wrestling that continues to get more listens, continues to get more work, continues to basically get more recognition the longer I go than everybody else? Because I'm the only motherfucker that they actually know is real. They actually know, because in a big worked business, Brian, I'm a real asshole. And people can tell that. and they respond to reality. They respond to legitimacy. They respond to credibility. Do I always mean the things that I say? Usually, especially if it's about anything important. But when I'm winding somebody up just because I like to watch them twist, then I can say shit just as convincingly that I don't mean. And then where does the fucking work start and the fact stop? We don't know. And isn't that the essence of professional wrestling to begin with? But ultimately, they know when I take the piss out of the fucking play wrestlers or state my opinion or fucking just go off about the goddamn trip that I had to fucking Milwaukee, that I'm telling the truth. And that's something they can't get anywhere else in wrestling, because everybody else in wrestling these days, in one way or another, is as phony as a football bat. I don't have to work when I go to work. I can just be me. As Buddy Landell used to say, I don't have to fly all the way to Honolulu to hang 10. I can just stand here and smile.
Well, with that, the drive-thru is closed. That seems fitting. Of course.
Maybe we better just take off.
Of course, you can hear more of this joyous wrestling talk this Thursday on The Experience, and again every Monday on the Drive-Thru. Both shows available wherever you find your favorite podcast, and of course on YouTube on the official Jim Cornette YouTube page, tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. It'll come right up. You have full episodes, clips of some of the popular segments, as well as the Omnibus collection. Go to YouTube and subscribe.
You know, I worked the Omni many times, but I never took a bus there.
Did you like the Omni?
Hated it.
Why?
Actually, I would have loved to have been in the Omni in the 70s, back in the day when the Georgia crew was the biggest names in the business, and especially the tag tournaments and all the big shows would sell out. By the time the 80s came around, and there had been that last couple of years of Georgia wrestling that had really sucked. Well, you know, when Ole forced Barnett out, and the booking went sideways for a year and a half or so, and the business started going downhill, and they were spending more time on the northern tours because that was a virgin territory, and, you know, Georgia had seen better days. Then Crockett takes it over. For the big shows, it was still a good atmosphere, but just for the regular house shows, I thought it was dark. I didn't like the way that it was very dark. The ring lights were just over the ring, but the whole building, and that was a big building, it was very dark. And the way that you came out down the crooked aisleway where you had to come down slanted and then turn right and then turn left, it was a long walk in the dark. It wasn't a great entrance. The Omni was not drawing, even in the heyday of Crockett in the 80s, like Charlotte and Greensboro and Philly and Baltimore. The Omni wasn't drawing that way anymore. And it seemed like that the people were a little jaded, and they rightfully should have been, because they'd been watching the best wrestling in the world for 15 years at that point. And it didn't have the atmosphere that some of the other towns had, even at the same period of time with the same talent on the roster. I didn't get into work in the Omni like I did Charlotte or Greensboro or Baltimore. It's a shame. But I wish I could have gone to the City Auditorium, because I bet that place was insane.
Find out what other venues Jim hates this week on The Experience, and of course next week on the Drive-Thru. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. And of course, you can follow the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network on Twitter at Superpodcasts.
But who would want to do that?
Who would want to go to Cornette's Collectibles for the finest in Jim Cornette merchandise? Who, I ask?
Who?
So many who want their burger towels, their T-shirts, their autograph photos, their restraining orders, their DVDs, their books, and so much more coming very, very soon. Golf balls coming very, very soon for you.
Golf balls?
Golf balls for the golfers out there.
I knew a girl one time could suck one of those through a garden hose.
Ah. I was about to say a name I better not say. But yes, JimCornette.com.
Oh, you knew her too? I didn't think you were that old.
Until next time on The Experience and next week on The Drive-Thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. Tally-ho!